Welcome back, listeners, to Lost and Searching. I'm your host, Seven, and today we're chatting to Oyin, the founder and CEO of Niyo Group, a multi-award-winning organization that uses technology to economically empower women from Black backgrounds. She's led a growing and scaling team across multiple different ventures in some what seem like very different areas, scaling up teams, running events, and also giving back a lot to the community, namely the startup community and the leaders within that community, while also trying to diversify that space. And by nature of reaching so many people, as well as having been so aspirational her whole life herself, Oyin can share some unique perspectives with us. And a little bit like myself, she also takes a somewhat philosophical, a little bit spiritual lens to some of these things and understanding what it actually means to show up as a leader, why the future is in our hands, the kind of battles we fight and why we fight them, the biggest challenges we can expect to face when we're growing anything that's worthwhile, and a lot more. So join us today as we go through all these things and a lot more in our usual very deep dives. A quick note before we get started is that the show is going to be going through some changes. So those of you who are here in its early days, this early audience, I really appreciate you. I see you. I appreciate you. It means a lot. And anyone who has any feedback for me, please let us know and give us a rating on Spotify and drop me a line directly if you have any feedback. I honestly really appreciate it as things start to evolve and you notice maybe over the next few weeks the brand change a little bit, what we communicate, how we do things change. This last couple of months of testing things out has been amazing. Thank you for being a part of the journey, and I do hope you enjoy. See you very soon.
How are things right now?
How are you right this second?
I think personally, it's probably like one of the most pivotal moments of my entrepreneurship career. You know, like you know that there's certain things that need to happen for you to be able to go to the next. And I don't think I have been dogged enough, even though I have it inside of me, to be able to make some bold steps. And I think I've been forced to. And so that's probably how I would describe this phase of my life. I think it's the stage of bold, the stage to be bolder. Now you may be thinking, oh my gosh, you were already bold, but I think that there are still some parts of me that still requires a little bit more doggedness and boldness.
Do you feel bold?
Do I feel bold? I feel like there's a no-nonsense switch that has switched on in my in my brain. So that didn't necessarily answer your question, but yeah, I do feel bold. But yeah, I do feel bold. That's probably I feel bold, but I'm trying to put this into words. I also know the effect of what my boldness could have on other people that may not fully have full context of what my boldness comes from.
Okay.
It's really loaded, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Give us that context. Where does your boldness come from?
So where my boldness comes from, definitely is probably how I was brought up, but also in this moment, in terms of like where my boldness is coming from in present tense, it's probably because I have like a very, I'm sure there's some parts of how my boldness is being expressed that is probably wrong, but I know that it comes from a deep gut feeling about what I'm meant to be doing in the next phase of my life.
What's that gut feeling telling you right now?
Oh, wow, okay.
We're catching you mid-pivot. This is really important. You're going to come back to this video in like a year.
And I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, was I right or was I wrong?
Exactly.
That gut feel is whether is the pace at which I should scale up a specific business model. To be honest, that's scale up a business model whilst turning on the tap of another. This is just specific for my education business, but also for my beauty business, in which we're in the room of right now. It's exciting because it's like actually now to truly be able to give it give it it's the attention that it deserves. Because if I'm being very honest with you, I don't think I have given this beauty business as much attention as it deserves. Because if I did, I think the impact would be a lot higher and the money would be beautiful.
Okay, I think we're going to come back to this because there's a stream of consciousness I'm going to have here around how you manage different priorities and how you choose what to focus on. But before we get into that in more depth, I want to know what's driven you to go as far as you have and push so hard and build so many things so far as it is. So what would you say is your why? Why do you do what you do? What gets you up every morning?
Do you know what? I think I have a stubbornness. I have a stubbornness that I must be great. Number one, no, it's just the fact of the matter. And also, it's not that I will just be great, but actually, I want to show that a group of people can be great despite the odds. So that's probably where it comes from. Now, if I kind of go back to like where this whole thing started, it all started from the fact that I always saw problems and I always wanted to solve them. I always saw problems and I wanted to solve them. And I wanted to solve them with making sure that people were not cut out of that process, that it was a symbiotic relationship between people, processes, and technology, and that's quite a difficult thing to achieve when it comes to where I'm coming from in terms of what I'm like, the fact that I focused a lot on Black women, and that's quite difficult because a lot of Black women don't have that social mobility or that social capital, or dare I say the education to actually understand how that symbiotic relationship works. I was having a conversation with someone earlier on about being able to, there's no word of a doubt, and again, this is not me blowing my own trumpet, that I'm actually a really great leader, but actually my managerial competencies, or not competencies, capabilities has probably been challenged when it comes to how that marries each other, because managerial strength comes from control. Managerial strength comes from mostly control, to be honest, and making sure that things are under control. Whilst leaders exist to empower people, leaders exist to make people thrive and be free. And so that marriage has been quite difficult for me over time.
How have you been bringing those two elements together? Because we have a lot of conversations in this space about the difference between leadership and management. And there are a million articles online about like, oh, this is what 10 traits of leaders versus managers and how they're different. And it gets really long, but actually many people still see them as being kind of the same thing. A manager needs leadership skills at the very least.
Yes.
Leaders need management skills at the very least. How are you navigating having both, being both? What do you see yourself in this miasma of stuff?
I mean, like, my upbringing has been one of like discipline, right? Which is a trait that can then gets translated into being a good manager. Because being a good manager is being able to manage yourself first of all, before you can manage other things and other people, right? But what I found was, as I've grown up, I can be rudimentary. This is what I'm going to do at what time. It took me, actually, I was speaking to a business coach the other day, and she was like, she asked me, she was like, I wonder whether you stick to your to-do list every day. And I was like, do you know what? That used to be me at university, but I do not stick to my to-do list every day. Because I'm so distracted and firefighting what everybody's doing, and being, dare I say, a leader that tries to help people and sit there with people. So to answer your question, how am I managing the two? I'm now learning the new way of doing that, because genuinely one of my greatest strengths is casting the vision, setting the strategy, writing a really detailed strategy, identifying who I think the people are to be able to execute that strategy, and then saying, hey, there is good. How do I then help you to? But actually, in this phase of my life, I recognize that it's not just about that. It's about pace. It's about leadership needs pace. I can't just say to you, Seven, do you know what? I really believe, you showed me traits that you can deliver, I don't know, entrepreneurship programs, for example. But then I ask you to come and, because you can do those programs, because you have great skills in programs, and dare I say entrepreneurship program, now come and run a hair program for me, right? You might be interested in it, but are you competent in hair programs? Probably not. And so if you are interested and you want to go down that journey with me, I have to manage you through that process. And I don't think that I've been the best at that side of things. I'm just being vulnerable,
The best way to be.
Yeah. So for me now, it's really using my critical thinking skills, my objective skills, really using my, dare I say, cynicism side of my brain to really, really look rudimentary about and critically think about how does this really have a value alignment, number one, but also is this person really competent to the T to what I need to deliver on?
Okay. So you're asking yourself some hard questions, and they demand that you show up a little bit differently.
Yeah.
What was your default mode in more detail, right? Give us more of that detailed background about the way you'd like to be showing up versus how you now feel like you need to be showing up. And how did you figure out the difference? I do think a lot of us go through just kind of doing what we're best at, and it's a little bit unconscious for basically until something slaps us in the face and we can't anymore, you know?
What is my default of how I should show up? Do you know what? I feel like I've not had the chance to have a default in my life.
Interesting.
I don't think I've had the chance.
Okay.
For different reasons, I believe. Now, they might be wrong, but I feel like I have the different reasons.
By that, do you mean that you had to keep changing and pivoting, and so you couldn't really get into a habit or routine of like one set way of doing things? Is that what you mean, or something else?
If we're talking about my elements, yes. But if we're talking about one set way of doing things, in terms of process-driven way of doing things, not necessarily, because I think the process is a process, isn't it? It's but whether that process is followed appropriately. So my natural habitat, my natural element is to be a baby girl who just enjoys her life, right?
Okay. This is the opposite of your persona.
Yeah. Well, is it really?
Well, it's the opposite of the persona that a lot of us see, right? We see a really hardworking person, multiple businesses.
Okay.
A number of team members, a lot of things going on all at once. And it's like, whoa, like lots going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gives a very different picture to what you just described, which sounds more passive, but you're very active. There's a lot of creation energy there.
Yes, I do think I have that creation energy, but I think what I mean by it is just to be a baby girl.
Yeah, maybe it's my misunderstanding of the term. So
a baby girl means a chill girl. Yeah, a chill girl.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? If it was up to me, my alter ego, my alternative character,
I love this,
would literally travel the world and have her hair to her feet, braid, which I still do today anyway. And probably go to a lot of remote villages, and just pay people school fees, and just set up little projects. That's what I would do. In an ideal world, or probably just, in process of acquiring a farm in Nigeria, probably like just farm, probably like something like that. Like that's probably when I think about me today, that's probably what I would have chosen to do. When I think about where this entrepreneurial journey started to form from the age of 8, really, it was actually a penchant to want to see some change happen in my world. I knew I had this innate understanding that the world I was living in was this is not how it should be. I don't know why I had that. And so I always had that penchant for change. And maybe as I've grown up, I have fell into the reality that change is a lot harder to achieve than I naively thought. And actually that naivety that I've had since 8 still exists today. And actually it's helped me a lot.
It does for most entrepreneurs, yeah.
That naivety has helped me a whole lot. Some people look at me and think your vision is delusional. Like, what they mean is like the pace at which you think you can go is delusional. You need to not slow down, but you need to set a pace with what you have with what you actually have. So anyway, I say all of that to say that it's always that kind of innate person that wants a penchant for change. And so I think that the systems at which I've grown up in has almost had to cause me to assimilate into those systems.
What are some of those, color some context for us? What are those kind of systems you felt you had to fit into? Give us as much detail as you're happy to.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in Nigeria till I was 14. Achieving change in Nigeria for me was literally just following in my father's footsteps of, making impact in villages and making money whilst doing it. That's what he did. He set up a bunch of telecommunication masts, in remote villages in Nigeria, which made people be able to call each other. Like, that was like heroic for me. Like, my brother would just go, he was like, his team would go and set stuff up, and then we'd go and test it by the telephone booth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we can call people. That was like quite heroic for me. And I could call my grandma. That was heroic for me. So that was quite cool. And as much as I wasn't an operator at that age, when I moved here and I saw problems that existed, and I wanted to put change, I brought that raw Nigerian girl into the picture, and that never worked for me because those, I guess, dare I say, stakeholders, those people did not understand what the heck I was talking about. And so I had to assimilate myself to make sure that I was palatable.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I was understood, but I didn't lose my element. I still don't think I've lost that element regardless, right? And then let's just not talk about how I've navigated that journey of growth from a young age, from the fact that I helped set up a Dry January campaign with alcohol concerns. So, doing a lot of like proxy shareholder stuff to make sure that food that was sold in McDonald's were actually meat when there was issues with that. I just think about my teenagers and think, wow, crazy girl. So now being an entrepreneur, and having to deal with change all the time, and the change that comes from the system, and being able to assimilate to that while still maintaining being that like challenger, but being palatable to challenge people.
Right now, it sounds like what you're doing is a result of the opportunities that presented themselves to you. They're very different from some of the things it sounds like you want to be doing. If you had to describe, you just started to describe this ideal life, exactly. Who would you say you are now? And who do you aspire to be?
Who am I now? I am a woman of grit and resilience. I am a woman that is a lover of people and uplifting people in any way that I can. I am a woman of justice, I don't know if that's funny enough. I don't know whether I'm a woman of justice. I want to see justice. And I think that's probably where a lot of, in terms of the fruit of that that's translated into these businesses, right? And I'm a woman of innovation and creativity. I'm a woman that has, I think about innovative things every single day, of a different way of doing things. And I like to look at really old age ways of doing things and put an innovative spin on it. So that's who I am today. Who do I aspire to be? Where do I want to get to? I just want to become a woman of peace. It sounds really philosophical.
That's what the show's all about.
Yeah.
I told you before we started recording, I'm trying to also time-stamping myself here as well, trying to figure out how to communicate my personal brand. And there's this sense of can we all become our best selves? But then that begs the question is, what does that mean? Well, people who are conscious and free and at peace sounds like our best selves to me.
Exactly.
What's stopping us from getting there? Usually something, thing being the operative part, right? Something physical in our way or something within that is us getting in our own way, some kind of internal blocker somewhere. So that's why I think the distinction is interesting, because often we can say who we are now, we can say who we aspire to be, and then we realize there's a little bit of a gap. But then how do we bridge that gap?
That gap is war.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So being a woman of, and that sounds really, like, I'm not, by the way, I don't advocate for killing people.
Just in case that wasn't clear.
Just in case that wasn't clear.
Sure, okay.
Just want to make this really clear. That's not what I advocate.
Wait, listen, we live in the internet age. We have to preface everything.
Exactly. So if I'm a woman that likes to see justice, and then, like, for justice to happen, there needs to be a level of war. Whether that war means, like, back to back.
The internal
war, right? Or whether it's, a war between two people or a few people, there is an exchange. There's a negotiating exchange that has to happen. And that's really what war is. It's really that negotiating exchange. If you do this, then this will happen. If you don't do this, then this will happen, right? That's what, like, when we talk about legal wars, this is what we mean. It's just negotiating exchange, right? And so for me to be able to achieve peace, I recognize that I do have to war for my peace. And what does war for my peace look like? It means that actually in my existence, right, and as much as possible, I need to continue to push down barriers that exist for me and a group of women that we are bringing down the line to essentially achieve peace. When people are asking that they want to make more money, they want to be able to achieve they just want a peaceful life. They just want a life that is that is equitable, that makes sense, that is comfortable. Does that make sense? And so I recognize that I do need to war, because if I don't war, I'm not going to get that peace. Yes, because guess what? If I was to quit entrepreneurship world, because maybe I was just tired of all of that, I'm still going to find myself having to fight for justice just because of how I am wired, my DNA, in another system. I found myself doing that when I was in the corporate world, right? Where I would they named me the most inspirational woman of that company, and I was just an intern. Like, does that make sense? Like I did some crazy things that I should just mind my business. Really, like, does that make sense?
The world would be so much easier if we all just minded our business, wouldn't it?
It would be much easier. But I choose to just find myself doing, because the thing is, if I was to shut down my businesses today, I bet you that I would wake up next morning and find, because even in what my ideal world would be, it's still justice. Paying people school fees, doing little project with girls in remote villages. It's still justice. It's still justice. It's still a work of justice.
And it's ironic because, we're fighting the war for peace, which feels like a misnomer, but actually it's one of these interesting, I don't know what the word is, situations in life where the path to the thing seems contradictory of the thing.
Yeah.
But is that just a reframing of the thing, or an acknowledgement of the situation that we're in? We don't live in a straightforward world. Sometimes it feels simple, but it's rarely easy.
Yeah.
I bet if you did stop tomorrow, you get bored the next day, and then you'd find 100%. A new thing to do the day after.
100%.
You know what I mean? Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now. Yeah. Are there any other really significant experiences you think have shaped who you've become so far that you would like to add? Or that you think help us color the picture a bit more?
Okay. So I'm very conscious that I've talked around things and I've talked about maybe business. But I do think that it's very, like, I think I said this on another podcast, how I was brought up it's been so pivotal, whether it be how my parents instilled certain values inside of me, to my religious beliefs. I'm a Christian, right? To the schools that I went to. I went to dare I say, stark different schools. When I was in Nigeria, I went to probably one of the top boarding schools in Nigeria, right? So moving here, where I went to like one of the worst state schools in Birmingham. Like, what a contrast.
Yeah.
Right? Those things have really shaped me to really seeing the world in an objective manner and seeing the world in a centered manner. I've been a leader in business, recognized in different places or whatever. But I've also been a leader in faith as well, and I've been able to see how some of the things that happen both good and bad, have really shaped me in where I sit today. And do you know where do I sit? I sit in the fact that I'm just a high functioning human being. Don't call me, don't try and make me anything more than that. I'm just a really high functioning, critical thinking human being. Simple.
If that's how you want to, frame and identify it, then it's the case.
Yeah, 100. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But some people will say would use your. Some people would identify you simply by your title. So I'm really, really, really intentional about not being identified by my title. The CEO and founder of Niyo. No, cool. That's my title. Well done, right? But I'm actually what's gotten me that title is the fact that I'm a high functioning, critical thinking human being. When we start there, then we can work on a level playing field. Seven Jacobs is a high functioning, critical thinking human being. Seven Jacobs could be the CEO of the biggest leadership company tomorrow, but that's not you. You're not that. That's just a title. Because if that comes crashing, then you crash with that.
Yes, it's the attachment, the identity attachment to the physical thing.
Exactly.
If you lose that, who are you? And then
Exactly.
so many of us get lost along the slippery slope of the misidentification of who you are with what you do, or of what you are with something material and physical. Whereas what we are will always be far more significant.
Yeah.
That's interesting. As a result of being this high-functioning human being, you've built multiple businesses at the same time.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit first about these different businesses, what they're doing. One of them is this beautiful, very pink hair studio we're recording in. For those who aren't watching the video, we're recording in one of the businesses that Oyin runs, your hair studio. And it's very pink, it's very nice, very bright in here. I wonder how this is going to turn out on the video when I edit it. We'll find out. Like, future me will find out. Amongst some very different businesses to this. And all of that's also very different to some of the stuff it sounds like you want to be doing more of, or would be doing in an alternate life, maybe later in life. How did you get into building multiple different things at once, and how do you manage it all?
Do you know what's funny? I don't see it as multiple different things.
Okay.
I see it as one thing, but I feel like the world has made me make it into multiple different things. And the story of how we got here would make sense. I started this journey of building business because I didn't really want to build business. I just wanted to become an economist, and eventually become the president of Nigeria at the time. Really bizarre. I don't think I want to do that right now.
Have you seen politics right now?
Exactly. Have we seen? So this started off with me just doing people's hair in my bedroom, growing my clientele to 1,000 women by the age of 21. And then these women coming to me to say, oh yeah, I need help with my CVs, my business plan. I'm saying, oh yeah, let me help you. And I just got overwhelmed by it all. And I said, let's just do an event. And that event was called Beyond Hair. We did it first time, it was really successful, really great. Second time, third time. And the third time, we did the event was around, we had about 900 people there in Birmingham, here in Birmingham.
900 in one venue. This is a big event. Okay.
It was a big event back then. So yeah, like this concept of doing Niyo Fest is not necessarily new to me. It's something that we've been doing for a long time, events. And at that event, we focused on technology, right? And we did a coding class. And from that coding class, we had an opportunity of, oh wow, like turn this into a bootcamp, because actually there is not that many Black women like in this sector. So that's kind of how things came about. So at the center of all of it is the people that we're impacting, right? So my education business, right, Niyo Labs focuses on upskilling people, specifically underrepresented groups, specifically Black women, to be able to get into tech through bootcamps. And we also have an edtech platform that rewards you for learning. Yeah, and the impact there has been just outstanding in terms of the amount of people that have been able to move on to employment. My beauty business is, again, using training people to become their own hair bosses. Again, women to become their own hair bosses, to have the resources, whether it be the technology resources or the physical space resources, to be able to run their own hair businesses. So there's a continuous thread of training, continuous thread and skills, a continuous thread of resources, continuous thread of providing opportunities and environments to thrive.
And you've just essentially found different platforms to execute the same thing through from your perspective. That's interesting. Because people are very straightforward if they're from the outside of something. Right? I need to know exactly what you're doing so I can put it in my box. I need to label it as this, put it in this box so I know if it's right for me or how to describe it to other people.
100%.
How have you navigated like that?
It's been hard. It's been so difficult. And I think this is probably where a lot of confusion comes into what we actually do sometimes. So it's been difficult. And I think that eventually it will click. That's what brand, like the whole journey of building a brand is, I mean, Samsung was once a fish company, right? But now they're like in electronics. They were once a fish company.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But like, I'm sure the vision and the why from the founders has not necessarily changed much from the beginning.
If they had one at all.
If they had one at all. Let's just assume that they did, right? But dare I say, I don't think they would have gotten this far without a vision. I'm so sorry to say, right?
Okay.
So I think a vision is really important. So for me, I'm not stopping in the beauty sector. Like I'm not just operating. I want to operate in as many industries as I can. But I think what's the common thread is that I want these industries to be built by underrepresented groups, because then the conversation about economic empowerment would be different. If you know what, like, I mean, like, if we had, the biggest tech company built by a Black woman, we would not be having conversations, some of the conversations that we're having today about equality of opportunity in the workplace. The culture will be different, and so on and so forth. So that's my why. But then what tends to happen is that people put me in a D&I box, or people put me in this, social enterprise, but I'm not a social enterprise and I'm not in a D&I box. What I'm trying to do here is to change the way we see business, to change the way we see society. Now, if you want to put me in that box for you to basically get what I need from you, do your thing. But I will continue to reiterate that you can't put me in that box.
It's interesting to reflect on these dynamics as tools to navigate the physical world, right? I have over the last few months really started to develop the perspective that things like elements of our identity, things like being put in a box or putting others in a box, none of these things are like inherently bad. They're tools. And misusing the tool, overusing the tool becomes unhelpful very quickly, but it doesn't make them bad necessarily. Often we don't like being put in boxes. I don't either. None of us do. Sometimes it feels a little bit like if we don't put ourselves in some kind of box, someone else will do it for us. And there are probably some very particular boxes I can imagine you've been put in by other people.
Yeah. It's quite sad.
Which must be really frustrating.
Very sad and frustrating. Because even if I chose to have a simple, dare I say, simple business, I will still be put in a box. I will still be put in a box. Which makes it really difficult when it comes to scaling your business.
Okay, how so?
Because then how people see you, the perception of you, I mean, I can work hard to make sure I can change that perception, and I do need to work harder to change that perception. can then affect the people that you attract to help you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, for example, if you see me as this black woman that just happens to be doing some really great stuff, that does fluff. If you just see me as, oh yeah, she's just taking up, she's just a black girl. I'm not a black girl that just talks about black women taking up space. That's not what I am. Don't put me in that box. I actually am here for substance. Like, I really want us to build stuff. And that's why I've chosen some hard paths. Like, I don't have to run boot camps for black women. We don't have to teach you the hard skills. I could do easier things. I really could. I really could do easier things.
Especially with your business model, it's actually really hard. It's like what you do is really challenging. The margins are really thin. Yeah, absolutely.
It's proper hard. It's really tough. And so I've not chosen this path because it's easy. I've chosen this path because I genuinely want change. Because there's certain initiatives and businesses that will move the dial, but they won't move the dial much when it comes to, let's look at the data. When we started running boot camps for black women, we were actually we were the first actually. We were actually the first to actually focus on technology boot camps for black women. Like
a very specific niche.
We were very specific on that. And we did it in partnership with another organization. At that point, it was 1%. We moved to 2%. Now, it's not nice. It's like 2% is not a great achievement. But 1% to 2% in the space
it's a 100% increase.
It's a 100% increase in the space of a year. We ignited something in the ecosystem to be able to change that. And for me, that's what I'm talking about when it comes to impact.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we have to do hard things to change, to see things change.
With so many options or pathways in front of you, how do you decide what to prioritize and how do you manage it all?
My God, this is the age-old question.
It is actually, yeah. I've asked it to a few people.
Do you know what? I spend a lot of my time studying African business moguls. They never did one thing. One of my friends, her dad, one of the richest men in Nigeria before he passed away, he never did one thing. He didn't have one business. He had multiple, in fact, 15 businesses.
Yeesh.
But
he managed himself.
No,
teams.
Teams.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way to.
There's no way he does. Yeah. I mean, but he could leverage relationships. He had relationships that he could trust, and that relationship thing comes from perception. But you don't. I also know another business mogul who's a woman, but she doesn't have 15 business. And I'm not saying I'm going to have 15. I might end up. I'm still. Dare I say, I'm still at the beginning parts of my journey. By the time I get to 50, I might have 15 businesses. Because who knows? Depends on what I decide to focus on. Maybe I just get bored of entrepreneurship and just say, do you know what? I'm just going to do full-time, ministry or religious ministry. I don't know. But anyway, so like, I look at them and I just think they don't have two heads. And so people need to stop telling me that I can't do multiple things. And so how we've been able to achieve where we've got into today is actually great levels of leadership. It's leadership and it's trusting people to be able to run things for you and rewarding them correctly. Where I think my plateau is the lack of financial resources. Because if I had all the money in the world allocated to these different projects, and dare I say I have some other people, it'll be a different ballgame. But it's people will look at me and think they can't trust me with that money, can't give me that money because of their perception of me as a young black girl, maybe woman. Let's not say. Anyway, I think it's quite deep.
It must be something you've experienced a lot of.
Yes.
The typecasting and assumption making and labeling and box putting into. How do you keep yourself going through all of it? Because it does defeat some people.
Yes, it does defeat.
Whether temporarily or permanently,
I think I keep myself going I'm learning to know when to keep myself going on certain things and when not to keep myself going on certain things. I think I just changed my environment.
Okay,
I changed my
that's
environment.
interesting. What do you mean, and how did you do it?
When people downcast me, because it happens a lot, and I'm not going to pretend I'm going to sit here and say, I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't happen. I just shift myself from being in that space, and I move myself to a space that accepts and honors what I have. It's as simple as that.
That's really smart to do. And it sounds really simple when you say it. If you believe that whole thing of like, you are the product of your environment, the 5 closest people around you, blah, 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 you know, at some point you've got to go, well, if I'm the product of my environment, can I just change my environment to be more conducive to the person I want to be? And the answer is, yeah, you absolutely can.
100.
That begs a question is, how do you do it? Like, one thing I've noticed about you is you've got a great network and you've got a great capacity for building and expanding your network. And I feel like that's a part of this kind of same question, is like to consciously surround yourself with the right people, find the right people, build up the right people, and you're leading them, craft that environment. How do you go about doing it? It's a multifaceted thing. So walk us through, like, do you have a process? Do you have a thought?
I don't know.
Do you know what's the secret? Give us your secrets.
Do you know what? My secret is very simple. I just pray for favor every day. For those that are not religious, that might be really difficult to get your head around.
Okay.
But that's just my secret.
Describe it, what you mean by favor.
So
Favor
favor being like, God, put me around the people that I need right now to be able to allow me to advance. And I've seen that, and I'm not saying that this is a magical wand. I just, like, it's not a magic wand. But I do believe that a lot of things are firstly spiritual before they happen physically, right? So my secret starts from that foundation, right? And so from that foundation, I then show up in an authentic way that allows me to get help and that allows me to add value to people. When those people, there's some people in my network. I mean, I have queens in my network. I'm not boasting, it's just the truth, right? I can text one of the queen right now and she will respond if it's up top 5 minutes. That's not something that anybody can just have access to. I recognize that I have that gift that I now give to other people. So now, because of me, the queen now knows a lot of other people. Do you know what I mean? But also, like, let's talk about how we're connecting right now. You've chosen me to be on your podcast because there's something about my character or me that you want to understand and learn from, or you think is admirable. I don't know, whatever reason you've chosen. So for me, it's a case of, my step process is it's not necessarily linear, but is I genuinely pray for favor every day for God to put me around the people that I can align myself with. That's the first thing. But also number 2, showing up as my true authentic self in every single moment and adding value to people. Never going into a conversation to wanting to take, but also take us first. We're always looking at how can I add value to this person genuinely. And I don't say that because that's the equation in order to get all the things that you want. I say that because that's genuinely how I show up in the world.
I take a very philosophical perspective of there's a combination of a few things here. First of all, the world tends to give us more of what we are. So this idea, or this concept, I should say, of favor, it's interesting because I haven't heard that word used before, but it's essentially this idea, from my interpretation, of if the world's going to give you more of what you are, show up as what you want. I have a number of rules for my life, and Rule 12, it kind of comes from the belief that we are our actions. And if we are our actions, act like the person you want to be.
Good.
And you might just realize you've become them.
Oh, wow, I love that.
And so I have this really strong belief that if
I think
you
therefore
want
I am.
to exactly.
By Descartes.
Well, do you know what? I think therefore I am is interesting because you can take that in a different light. You can take that in the light of if I can observe my thoughts, if I can observe the thinking, then I might actually be more than what I think. This is where it gets really philosophical. See, I told you this show, I'm trying to figure out how to describe where I'm going with this because it gets real philosophical. But the point being that when you're, as you call it, praying for favor, I'm interpreting that with what spirituality means to me in my lens as showing up as the person you believe we should have more of in the world. And guess what? The world's going to give you more of that person. And so for those that maybe, don't have the same kind of religion that you do, it's this, I do still think it's super applicable. It's this concept of like, give to the world what you want more of, and the world will give it back to you. And if you're trying to craft an environment, you go, okay, well, I'm just going to show up in the world the way I think the world needs more of. What you'll notice very practically, right? So if we remove this kind of philosophical or spiritual element just for the sake of argument, very practically what this shows up as, from my perspective, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is like, are you going to be around someone you don't want to be around? No. Are you going to want to be around someone you do want to be around?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So if you show up as someone that people want to be around, guess what? They want to be around you. They're more favorable towards you, more kind to you, more giving to you. And if you're doing it to get something, like, people aren't stupid. Like, I know there are a lot of like not great decisions that feel like they get made sometimes or whatever, but that's just people going about their lives. They've got their reason, they've got their stresses. Generally speaking, people can suss things out. If they know you've shown up to take and just only take, we'll feel it. And so it becomes this big, when you zoom out from this perspective, this big cyclical universe, which is what we're in, of energies bouncing off energies, creating, of cause and consequence. It's this like what comes around goes around type of energy. And I think personally, an accelerant for all of that becoming positive change is being aware of it, to have awareness of it. So when you're talking about praying for favor, I'm thinking, you're consciously manifesting who you want to be as opposed to kind of accidentally letting it happen.
No,
because there's a huge difference. Someone can have the same end goal or want to be a person, show up in a certain way, but never actively think about it, never actively put their energy towards it. Where attention goes, energy flows. If there's no energy there, you're decelerating as opposed to accelerating.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to add to that. I think I'm very intentional about how I show up every single day, to the extent where, if you listen very careful to me, I'm very critical about, not critical in a bad way about myself, but very critical of my thinking. Very critical of what I did 5 minutes ago, because I understand I'm always evolving and reproducing my thoughts. And so for me, it's like, from a practical lens, it's like really showing up in a critical manner of, who I really want to be, and who do I think like that person should materialize into, and how does that materialize for other people as well, and what is like right and wrong. And I think actually, in some of the decisions or indecisions I've made in business, I think that's been a bit of a stumbling block, because I'm like, this is the human being that I want to be. But actually, business doesn't sometimes require, like, it's not about being a human being sometimes. It's about, can you just deliver on this? Do you know what I mean? And your competencies, rather than the whole human being. So I was talking to my partner the other day, and he was like, Oyin, Oyin, you've got really, really, really admirable character trait of, you just really want the whole human being to be good, right? That's what you really want, but it's going to be detrimental to your business growth if you're not careful. He told me that, like, point blank, straight, period. He was like, you've got to cut some of this stuff out. You just got to cut some of this stuff out. Doesn't mean that you don't get to be that. It's just that there are boundaries around that. you know. But anyway.
Well, actually, this is a really interesting point because focus is a part of this kind of question of how do you manage, even if you see it as one big thing as opposed to like 3 or 4 separate businesses, it's still different focus areas. And that begs this focus question of, you know, again, if where attention goes, energy flows, and your attention's on, even if you see it as one big picture, 4 broad stroke areas, you now have 25% attention on 4 things. Or do you see it differently?
So what you're saying now is you're right, 100%. I have my eyes in different things. Why though? Because I have not set up a proven system, working system in those 4 different things, and I don't have the money and the people across those 4 different things to make those things not be. So then if I then set up the system, my focus is not in the brands or the businesses, my focus is in the systems that I've now set up, which then begs itself as one thing.
Yes. Okay.
So I've not got into that place, but that's where I'm
Okay.
that's where I want to get to.
Okay.
And that's where I'm working hard to get to. And that's why I've hired a coach to get me there.
Got you.
Because you are right. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that I disagree because you're right.
And as that starts to happen, you can hire in other people to do that.
Yeah. So someone like Grace Beverly, right? You could argue that myself and Grace Beverly are in similar boats. Grace Beverly has her personal brand that she's managing, which is a business in itself, dare I say, because of like, I guess, the volume of which she's operating in. She's got her productivity planner, I think, business, whatever. I don't know. Yeah, anyway, she's got Tala, which is a fitness wear business. And she's got Shreddy, which is a, you know, operating in like, but one of the things that I've observed about that woman is that it's one thing for her. How is it one thing? All she focuses on is raising funds and being the face of the brand. I don't have that luxury just yet.
What do you need to do to transition into that? What do you currently think needs to happen?
So this is the thing. This is where but I've got the business coach to help me to do, is to kind of figure out the structure. Because I've got the strategy, I have it all written out. It's not a problem, right? I need to play the game of the business world. I just need to increase my content, because if I became, and I know that I could do. I know that I could be. I could do it. Like it's not a problem. But it's literally just investing my time to get that content piece going, and also making sure that I build the people up enough to operate the things that I need. And that's where the transition becomes really tough. Anyway.
One of the things I've noticed can motivate us is the end goal, the end of the road. And one of the things that strikes me is you're describing, like you described at the beginning, a slightly different life where you're going around doing cool things in it sounds like also a business basically, but a very different type of business. Is there a pathway from where you are now to that kind of life, or do you see it as like parallel universe?
Yeah. I just need to marry my partner so that I don't. I'm joking. No, I'm not actually. Yeah, there is a pathway. I think it requires getting more competent people around me. Just, and getting the cash. I've given myself 3 years left for being as super operational on my education business, genuinely.
Okay. 3 years is a long time, actually.
I know, but it's short to some people.
Okay.
Max 5, right, my education business. And I just want to do my beauty business. Like, I want to rein in on that. So like that 3 years, like I have some metrics around that. I have like what the money looks like. And the thing is, it's not going to be the business itself is not going to be sexy business. It's not going to be sexy. We will make it sexy, but the actual business is not sexy. So, because I've just looked at what works for me, and then how do I scale that up? Yeah. For my beauty business, it's looking at that and then selling it potentially. And then get into that place where I just chill and rest. Probably retire at 45 max. And then do the things I want to do.
Well, I'm a big
Live in
believer in
Lagos.
there you go. I'm a big believer in can we do the things you want to do now or much sooner? Because 45 years or the age of 45, and you're looking at a number of years. When you're talking about 3 or 5 years, that's much sooner. And then, have you heard Elon Musk's concept? Whatever you think of him, it was from years ago. Really powerful idea of whatever your 5 or 10 year timeline is. See what you can do to shrink it to 6 months.
Oh.
It's whatever you need to do to shrink it to 6 months. And then you might find that it takes you a year and a half. Wow. But it's a lot faster than 5 to 10 years.
Do you know what? I need to write that down. Makes sense.
Because if you can just be which is what this is to be the thing he's really great at doing is not social media, clearly, but is cutting out all the BS. It's there are stories of him going do we really need to order that screw from this country, which is really hard to get and more? Why can't we just use a normal screw or whatever, random stuff to just cut out all the little teeny tiny bits of BS inefficiencies.
Yes.
And if you have the work ethic to work really hard, and I'm not necessarily promoting hustle culture, but the idea of if you have the drive to put in the extra work, then combine that with cut out all the BS
no nonsense
to get to whatever the MVP of the goal is.
That's good.
The MVP of the business is.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
I feel like I'm getting a coaching session.
There you go. That's what I'm here for.
Yes.
And I wonder what that would be for you, because if I think about your different businesses, one of them operates on government funding. That's never fun. We were talking about that before we started recording. It's that's never fun.
Yeah.
This business that we're recording in now, you don't have it open every day or anything like that. So what are the things you think right now you could be doing to shrink that timeline you just mentioned?
Do you know what?
I just want to get your raw thoughts.
No, I love it. Elon Musk is probably one of my, again, don't shoot me for this, one of my greatest business inspirations, actually.
Okay.
Not character-wise.
Yeah, sure.
Business-wise, I'm this guy is solid. This guy, no matter whatever we think of him, he delivers. I'm sorry. He delivers something.
Yeah.
Right? Whether we like him or not. Now, what can I do to shrink some of that? Some of the things that to get myself to that kind of goal. I think for my government contract business, it's not really funding because it's not really grants, to be honest. It's just contracts that they make you do. It's really just scaling that up. It's literally scaling that up. It's not sexy. I'm not saying it is. It's scaling that up. It's also hiring the right people to be, that just know how to play that game. On that. And you are right. We can do that in 3 months and 6 months, whatever. With my beauty business, actually, one thing I haven't mentioned to you is I'm literally this is an MVP. Where you're sat is an MVP. And it's going to be a franchise model. I have a meeting with a franchise consultant today. I'm just going to hire somebody to run that for me, to run the franchise. But the thing is, we need to prove certain things with this model first, with this space first, to be able to make that franchise model work. So I already have a few franchisees. I have about 4 of them who are ready to give me a total of 7 figures together, cumulatively, to be able to run their own franchises. But I need to prove certain things first. And I also need to be a lot more dogged in my approach when it comes. So I don't need to be having loads of round cycle. Are you in or are you out? And actually being that bold, and not being afraid of that, of people being calling me, stereotyping me as angry black girl or whatever, but just being really bold and straight to the point. And there as I said, go to where I'm honored, and this applies to clients as well. Because governments actually honor, the government really honors me. And I don't like the system, but actually the people in the government really honor me and honor what we're about.
That's good to hear. That's not what you'd necessarily expect, is it?
No, you wouldn't. I mean, and I hope that doesn't come as a backlash, because wouldn't necessarily say that I am partisan. I'm not partisan, but I do think that they do have to honor me because it's like what we're doing contributes directly to what they're being.
If your goal is economic empowerment,
Yeah.
You have to look at facts and things at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's just a thread here when we're talking about leadership and we're talking about hiring and finding people, which is really interesting to me because one of the goals / early explorations of the early days of this show is kind of on a question of what makes great leaders and how do we find and identify them, right? From my perspective, and this is slightly selfish, so the show's goal might change, will shift a little bit, but one of my interest areas is how can I identify leaders as I just go around. So many times, even in this show, even one of our episodes is literally titled like the patterns that lead to successful business leaders or something, because when you've had a zoomed out image of so many leaders close up, hundreds of like entrepreneurs, things like that from my perspective, you start to see patterns that emerge. Something you spoke of earlier is like why I invited you on the show is because you also have a lot of these patterns. You fall into these patterns of like, of things that are more likely to lead to success because the people that tend to go further have these, whether they're character traits, whether it's mindset traits, heart set, soul set. And I'm almost trying to figure out how do we as a collective community identify leaders, not necessarily people in leadership positions, but people who are showing up as great leaders as we interact with them, right? So if you're hiring, how do you know if the person sat across from you is a great leader beyond their references and their experience, the stuff that's on their CV? How do you know? What do you look for?
Leaders?
Exactly. And this transcends, I think it transcends experience. I think it transcends culture. I think those things will shape or influence how it manifests, right? If your whole experience is in one industry, you might show up a little bit differently. Or if you're from a certain culture, you might show up differently. But the traits can still reveal that who you are is someone who is or has the potential to be an amazing leader. And so for someone like you who's expanding and looking for very specific, people to fill leadership positions, and as you grow your businesses, you'll be looking for leaders to lead these different businesses. What do you look for? How do you identify if the person you're speaking to is like, you're the person?
So John Maxwell, I don't know if you know who he is.
Vaguely, yeah.
He has loads of books on leadership, and one of the kind of common theme across his book is leadership is influence, right? So like no one can argue with the fact that you are a leader because you have a level of influence. I mean, like I don't say yes to everything, right? The fact that you influenced me to come to my salon to come and do that shows that you are a leader in itself. And actually, I don't think we reward that enough in business, like the amount of influence.
It's really hard to quantify.
It's hard to quantify, but it's easy to be discerned.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think right? It's interesting.
It's like and why is it easy to be discerned? If I was to pull up your LinkedIn profile, for example, or let's just pull your TikTok, it doesn't even matter, a social media profile of you, and I was to show it to my friend who understands this concept of leadership is influence, and I said, what do you think about this guy? Right? Actually, they'll be like, yeah, he's great. Like
my TikTok doesn't have many followers, no. So I look at things like that.
It's not about the followers.
Okay.
It's not about the followers.
Okay.
Because you could follow somebody on Instagram because they have influence, but they have little influence in the part that, because we're talking about hiring, right? They have influence on maybe how you laugh.
Okay.
Like there's an Instagram profile on a bunch of eggs. That's not good. Like I'm not gonna eye an egg. Am I? I'm not. It has influence on the fact that I find it quirky, it's curious, it's different.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
This is okay.
But there's also another Instagram page of this girl, this intern, what's she called? The marketing intern, I think is what she's called. where basically she transformed the whole drinks business by smashing cans every day, and it was her strategy as an intern, and she grew that business, and they didn't have to do any ads, and it was just all on organic marketing. That is a marketing leader.
Oh, that's interesting. Right. So these things you see, these like viral campaigns run by some random intern where it's like they thought of an interesting idea, they just made it happen, and as a result, it transformed the
Yes,
business.
exactly.
Okay, I see what you're getting at.
So I'm very good at discerning the leaders. Now, leaders, and the thing is, there are some people that have tried to master learning leadership. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that leadership cannot be learned, but you can tell the ones that are have it innate, because they tend to be quite disruptive. They tend to be quite. They don't stick to the status quo, and you almost have to assimilate them into understanding the status quo. You tend to think about things in a different manner. They tend to problem solve quickly. Whilst you get people who learn how to be leaders, maybe have observed other people and then copy those people. Those people, if they don't sink into their authentic self and accept their authentic self, might find themselves continue to deceive themselves throughout. And I'm saying this from experience because I have been deceived where I thought this person is a leader, but actually this person just knows how to influence people to get things done for them. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Right? There's certain people that are leaders, in this sense, influence change and influence direction. And it's just easily discerned. It's easily, and whenever I'm hiring a critical role in my company, I at the final stage of the interview, I ask some really, really outlandish questions that has nothing to do with the role. I ask them, if your boss if I was to call your boss right now, what would they say about you? I ask, what is your innate belief system is? If there's something that you could, I give you 500K today, what would you do with it? If there's something that you used to believe that you no longer believe in anymore, what is it? Like, that shows me that you are a leader because you're thinking in a way that's different from other people. Now, I say all of that to say, like, it's easy to spot and it's easy to get, because oftentimes and not, great leaders just create their own thing. They solve their own problems. And if they're not doing that, they find themselves frustrated. They find themselves, they're not free most times. Or if they're not given that freedom, great leaders are hard to manage, is probably what I'm trying to say to you.
Oh, that's interesting. Because that almost sounds really ironic. Great leaders are hard to manage.
No, they are. If that leader does not align with the system, if they don't find themselves in alignment with your system, it's going to be really difficult to manage them.
That's really interesting. There's this authenticity piece. How do you discern if someone is being authentic? Because I know you say, and some people have said this to me on the show as well, but it's like, you kind of just know.
Yeah.
And we talk about gut feeling, which I think is actually really important. I've had a few conversations already on the show about gut feeling. And I think it's really important. I do think a lot of us, we live in a very materialistic time in history where we're caught up in the physical and in the mind and the brain. And so discerning between whether we're tapping into our gut to use discernment or not is in itself sometimes challenging. So how do you discern someone's authenticity and trust that gut feeling?
I first of all start from the place that I don't know everything. So I come in and this is where this discernment thing, with accurate discernment, actually starts from. Accurate discernment and people who have really good, strong levels of getting it, their gut feeling being right, are people who come in without any preconceptions of anybody. When I come into a conversation with no, I'm not going to come in to expect that you're going to be the best person in the world. Neither am I going to come in that you're going to be the worst person in the world. That gives me a level playing field of you giving me all of that data and me watching the patterns that you're giving me. This is how my gut feel works, right? So I get that one instinct of weirdness, and I'm like, okay, interesting pattern. I'm gonna keep piling it up. I get that one instinct of dare I say, great, positive, things. I'm like, okay, this is how it works. So so it's normally for me. It normally works in patterns.
Okay. That's interesting because you need enough time to recognize patterns.
Yes, you need time. You need time to, but it's not. I don't think you need like when I'm talking about time. I'm not talking about super lengths of time. We could be sitting here for 1 hour and I can figure out whether I can trust you or not because I'm spending that time to work out the patterns.
Oh, okay. So this is actually something a little bit different, I think, which is trust. Trust, I think, becomes a little bit different because I guess trusting someone to do a certain thing might be a little bit different to trusting someone inherently.
Yes.
Right? You can deliver on X, but I wouldn't leave you with my children or whatever.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I guess what we're talking about is being able to discern if someone is authentically showing us enough to figure out if we can trust them with the thing we want to trust them with.
Yeah.
Have you ever gotten that wrong? Trusting the wrong people with things?
Yes.
So I think we all do at some
Yes, I
point.
have gotten
And
that
how we react to it is what's most important.
100%. But why have I gotten that wrong? I've gotten it wrong because I myself did not know what I was looking for when I really thought about it.
Okay.
Or I didn't have the confidence to flesh out what I was looking for to that person.
And how have you dealt with that when you've noticed it?
I try and mentor people out of it, but I've now learned that you don't do that.
You try to what?
Mentor
People out of it. So, in other words, kind of expect them to improve, give them what they need to improve.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then I noticed that some things can't be mentored out because that's not their element. That's not the element. Some people are operating in their force. Listen, most things can be mentored out of if the person feels like they're in the right habitat for them. If they know they know deep down that this is actually not what I want to do. I've had staff members who has been, dare I say, seat warming, right?
What does that mean?
What I mean by seat warming is you're just in this job because you're too scared to do what you really want to do.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Not that they're not doing. It's not that they're not ticking off on their tasks, but you can just tell. And so I remember sitting down with someone that I employed before. I said, I think you should just go for what you want. This is really crazy for me to say as an employer, but you should just go for what you want because it will do me and you a favor.
Yeah. It actually does work out better for both of you because if they don't, you are going to have someone who doesn't really want to be there. And there are the hidden metrics of if I really want to be here, it's going to lead to extra results. It's not just about fulfilling like a job description or whatever.
Exactly.
It's all the
Especially
little extra
not for a
things.
startup.
You don't have the space
we don't have the
for that.
space.
Yeah. You can have people who are just coming to collect their paycheck at a big company where they've probably forgotten about you.
Yeah, exactly.
But a small company doesn't have space.
Exactly. So that's what I mean by like you can't mentor people out of a problem. I think unless they themselves see themselves there and have that gut feeling that they want to stay there for their career development.
With a lot of what we've discussed so far, as we kind of start to wrap up the conversation, I'm aware that you give a lot of this to a lot of people. A lot of, podcasts, but also privately, there's policy and advocacy work that you do, things like that. And so you're reaching a lot of, again, leaders or people in leadership positions, both. I had to make a distinct difference between the two, but you reach both. What are the big messages if you were to distill them to those people? I mean, what do you think that the people in our leadership positions in our world around us are getting wrong right now?
I think that what we're getting wrong right now is a lack of perspective of actually what's actually going on in the world. What I mean by that is, I can only speak from my context. I was speaking again to my partner and I was saying, yeah, like I don't understand. Like I think he doesn't have a clue what's going. I think yeah. Anyway. um, I was saying to him, I said, yeah, but you can't bring up that policy because people's lives at home affect their work. He's like, no, but that has nothing to do with work. No. Yes, it does because it has. So it's like, I think I love the work that's been done with the future. Anybody that's building stuff in the future of work, because I think, us really being able to dissect what that future of work piece really looks like and understanding that, dare I say, work and life has become so blended, more blended than it's ever been, and so there is more onus on us to be able to change that. So I think for me, it's like really let's drill down to the detail and actually telling ourselves the truth of exactly what happens in our world and building up solutions around that.
What is that truth? What do you think we're missing? Or that, like,
I think I was actually having a
people are missing?
conversation with, again, dare I say, a policy person here in the West Midlands. I said to her that we must record a podcast
Okay.
around that conversation because it was loaded.
Okay.
I've never had a conversation with a policy person in the UK like that before, and I thought I really respected her because she was just said it as she felt it. It's the fact that the world has become a lot more separated. There's a lot more disparity. What you're thinking at home versus what you're thinking at work are two different things. And to me, that's really strange, right? Like in terms of most people are thinking something different. They put in a different hat at home. What I mean, by the way, is like you could be racist at home and at work you could pretend not to be racist.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and actually because of like this, the disparity that exists in our world, we're seeing that cause more issues than not. And dare I say, no change happens because, prime example, you could talk about, Black Lives Matter movement, that's happened several times. And then after a few years, it then diffuses. It just shows to you that humans are humans and they're never going to change. It's just the way it is.
You know what? I wonder if it's the pendulum swinging. The pendulum is always swinging and is mostly out of what I think it's mostly out of a lack of consciousness of how we affect the pendulum.
Yeah.
The pendulum swung so far in one direction that when it starts to swing in the other, it goes even further, and then some people then get left behind again, and then it goes back a little bit, and it goes back and forth and back and forth, and obviously you hope that it goes to a place where it just stays still in the center and the pendulum stops swinging. I think it's with consciousness that we do that. We go, okay, we're not doing this to burden anyone, or we're not doing this to put anyone at a disadvantage. We're looking to, and these require nuanced conversations. Yeah. These require people to be empathetic and honest, and we're living in a polarizing time in the opposite of the environment we need to consciously slow down that pendulum.
100%. And I think that like the perception of certain initiatives have then caused more polarization than we realize. This is a challenge to me.
Yeah.
Myself.
Yeah.
Right? And like, I had that hard conversation with this policy person. I said, because she disagrees with so she's a race equality task force person.
Okay.
For the West Midlands. She's responsible for racial equality here. So she was saying to me, I don't really buy this, like, I need to include the white working class man as much as I include the black woman. And I said, true. But I said, then you have to challenge my work then. Like, because she's like, no, you don't. Like, no, I don't, because I see you as an initiative. But I'm just saying, like, from what I'm building, it's not necessarily just an initiative in the grand scheme of things. And so I can become a monolith in what I'm doing, right? And then cause that polarization, right? So if I continue to grow my business and it grows to this 9-figure business, dare I say, potentially, right? And it will still focus on black women, the political issues that I would face every day would be through the roof.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's like I'm not trying to like cut out my initiative necessarily, but it's also a deep reflection of like actually by wanting to do good actually could cause more polarization if we do not allow for conversations to happen. I mean, you see,
Yeah, if the way it's received ends up being received unhelpfully by
Exactly.
enough people, the
Exactly.
whole conversation becomes unhelpful.
Exactly. You've just literally nailed it on the head there. Where you see, like, when like something that focus on Black entrepreneurs, you're gonna get trolls all the time, aren't you? And that shows you that there's still polarization that exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think she would record a podcast, or do you think she's got to
I've tried.
think about her position because sometimes you have to think about the position in
She doesn't
government.
mind.
Can you say okay, fair enough.
She doesn't mind. But then again, we'll see.
I want to hear it. This is why
I will record it when she gets it, and when she accepts it, and then I'll put it up on social media.
Okay, good.
She's very, very, very smart. Yeah, she was talking to me about like the tragic incident between the Pakistani and Indian stuff and how her family was really like affected by it and so on and so forth, and how when Black people talk about injustices, they think it's just them, but like injustice is not just synonymous to Black people. It's across the board. So.
Yeah, this is an interesting like worlds colliding moment for me in a way, because I want to encourage greater consciousness and awareness and a sense of curiosity and discovery and openness through this show and this work. And my philosophy is that by working to become the best us's that we can be, tapping into our greatest selves, getting out of our own way, tapping into and fostering the best inner leader that we can be, that we can create more of that future more easily, hopefully. I say hopefully, that's what I really strongly feel at the moment. Yet we have to acknowledge where the existing leaders that we have are creating an environment that is the opposite. And then how do those two things play? And what does that mean we need to do? How do we all show up in the world differently?
I think vulnerability is so underplayed.
Okay.
I've had to make some tough decisions, but the ones that I've done with the greatest amount of vulnerability have produced better fruit than the ones that I've done without vulnerability and transparency. To expect a world that has become a lot more transparent in the grand scheme of, as in literally, you can find out anything you want to find out right now if you did enough digging on the internet. For our leaders to not be transparent and our leaders to not be vulnerable is literally far and far in between. So there's so much strength in being a transparent and vulnerable leader. Doesn't mean that you're like, a chitty chatter chatting about everything and not having confidentiality. It's about showing up, being authentically yourself as a human being, because that's the cry of the current generation. The cry of the current generation, is not about who's got the most credentials. It's about who can be the most vulnerable.
This is actually a really good point, because this is why we see the rise of influencers. If we feel like they've been vulnerable and honest, we've seen them at their darkest times or whatever, we feel like we can trust them more. In a way, I think it's the only reason why Donald Trump has had any success, let's call it success, because like Joe Rogan literally came up with a clip the other day of he was just because he's going on. He and Kamala are both going at the time of this recording on a bunch of podcasts, and Joe Rogan says to his face, "You say a lot of crazy shit,"
and it's like,
and that just cuts through. As long, at least I know what I'm getting is what people think, and that's the only reason he can have enough voters to even be relevant. But that's a thing that can kind of exist in American culture. I wonder if that can exist here. I say kind of because it normally still wouldn't, but it can enough, clearly, otherwise it wouldn't happen. Here, the British are very like,
PC.
This is how we do things, and it's very,
PC.
structured in a very specific way.
Yeah.
I don't know, I wonder if vulnerability is asking too much from them.
See, I mean, is it asking too much? It would if they don't become that, they will find themselves lagging behind. That's probably why you find it easy entrepreneurs find it easy to grow and scale in America, because it's actually failure
Yeah, it's a good thing over
is
there. Yeah.
very celebrated.
Yeah.
Here it's like, but like people like me, like I don't mind telling you, listen, I flopped like yesterday, and actually that's becoming a thing. Like the likes of Steve Bartlett, I don't, like he talks a lot about his times that he's flopped. So I think it's just how you position it for the British.
Yeah, I do think it will be
Palettes.
a wave, right?
It's a
Things
massive wave.
come and go in waves, and it's one of these oncoming waves. It's just about how long
long it
does it
lasts.
take? Do we have the time to wait? The longer it takes for things to improve in whatever capacities or whatever dimensions of life, the longer the change takes. The longer it will be before those results come. We've covered a lot of things. We've gone into a few different very philosophical directions, so I really appreciate this.
Nice. Okay.
As we close off the show, I have an ending question I like to ask everyone.
Sure.
The show is called Lost in Searching.
Oh, Lost in Searching.
So, Oyin, I'd love to know, are there any answers in life you are still searching for?
Ooh. I'm still searching for why is like, I mean, like when you look at the male and the female gender, why does gender affect psychology? Like like in terms of the way we think and how we show up in relationships.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Because that's a lot of the war that we fight in the workplace, really, from my perspective.
Okay.
Like it's the war of, like, I speak to my cousin who's like an investment banker, and she's like, I'm just sort of flipping tired of like male leadership and like how toxic it is. But I'm just like, how does that affect psychology, and how do you as a woman show up in a way that the man understands, and vice versa? So that's one thing I'm really searching for, not just in business, but at home as well. I think if I can understand that, I would like to write a book so that we reduce the amount of divorces that we see in our world, and we will actually see how we can actually truly have gender equity in the workplace.
I love asking this question because you'll get such a variety of answers. Sometimes it's super relevant to the conversation. Sometimes it's totally different.
Yeah.
And I love it so much. I might, if I could offer a thought towards that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's a difference I think there's a couple of things at play. I think one is gender/sex, and the other is femininity and masculinity.
Femininity, yeah.
I think this is really interesting because I see femininity and masculinity as being on a scale. These are very binary conversations in our culture.
Yeah.
But there are actually cultures all over the world for thousands of years that haven't seen it as binary. We're not it's like the Western current very modern concept of someone who identifies as non-binary isn't actually new. It just hasn't been popular for the last few thousand years, but it's not actually new. And one of the reasons I think it's really interesting is because we assign men to masculine and women to feminine, right? But if these are traits, then you can have anyone, regardless of their sexual identity, being on the scale somewhere leaning more towards masculine or feminine.
Okay.
So you can have a woman more masculine, you can have a man more feminine. And in certain dimensions as well, there are certain dimensions in which I know I present more in the feminine than the masculine, but I also consider myself fairly masculine in certain other areas.
Yes.
And I know for plenty of women where it's the vice versa, etc. And one of the reasons why I think having a community of diverse people is so important is because you show up with these different energies. And it's only when you have these mix of complementary energies do you get like a unifying whole that's a little bit closer to somewhere in the middle as an aggregate.
Yeah.
Right? So if in a household you have enough masculine and enough feminine energy, together you get a more complex picture where together you can solve far more problems than you could separately. And that is a direct impact on our psychology because we will show up differently thinking and seeing certain things.
But then do you not think that the
as a result.
nurture and like, yeah, like, so for example, what's common across like my friends and like my girlfriends and our conversations on like how we want our spouses to show up for us. It's very common, and like what the spouse wants is very common. But anyway, I feel like it's such a big hole that I'm searching for right now.
Okay.
Because I think if I can understand it, I don't think it's the fault of the man, because oftentimes it's always about men are bad.
Yeah, this is, I think the narrative right now is like the ownership is, I say ownership, the emphasis is placed in these kind of things on men in the good and bad.
Yeah.
So sometimes we'll reward men with a little bit too much credit, right? That's what, like, if we have a patriarchy, that's what it is. It's like so many things being framed for men or by men.
Yeah.
And then it's also the vice versa, where it's if something goes wrong between men and women,
fault.
it's all because of the man. And so it's like in both the positive and negative, it gets worse.
When there's sexual misconduct, it's always the man's fault.
Yes.
But that's not always the case. Sometimes actually,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
it's actually both. So I'm just really curious.
I found out earlier today that a lot of the, what's the word for it? Like household violence, basically. Abuse in relationships is actually two-way. A big chunk of it isn't just one partner to another, it's both ways.
It's both ways.
But it's only the man who usually gets blamed for it.
100%.
So it's male violence against women as opposed to both partners being violent or abusing each other.
Yeah, what did most of the time, women's words provoke potentially, I don't know, physical violence. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying we're not condoning
Absolutely
it,
not.
but
No.
it's like, what was the trigger to make that happen? Doesn't mean that the man beating his wife off is bad, but also, is it right for the woman to be saying venomous words towards her husband? That's also emotionally abusive to mess up his head. I don't think so. So yeah, that's my searching.
Really interesting. I feel like we could talk about that forever. We don't have the time for it today, but we could.
Yeah.
Oyin, I appreciate you so much being on the show.
No, it's okay.
It's really early on the show's days relatively, and it's actually going relatively well.
Well done.
But like I said before we started recording, I now need to basically become a content creator full time.
Yes.
And so I'm in this interesting space where I'm doing that, but at the same time getting to do the thing I love the most, which is having these conversations with cool people and learning a bunch as a result. I appreciate you giving all of us your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen.
It means a lot.
Thank you.